When Jackson Thorne uncovered the betrayal buried in his family's empire, he thought he could control the fire until the fire turned on him. The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the soft hum of distant city lights and the occasional hiss of tires against wet pavement. Jackson Thorne stood on the balcony of his apartment, staring out over the skyline, a glass of untouched whiskey resting in his hand. The amber liquid caught the faint glow of the city like it was burning, but Jackson's mind wasn't on the drink. It hadn't been for a long time. He wasn't the kind of man who forgot easily. Every sound, every face, every broken promise seemed to be etched permanently into his memory. That was both his gift and his curse. By day, Jackson was known as a sharp, confident man, someone who built his reputation brick by brick in a world where trust was rarer than gold. But by night, when the masks fell away, there was a storm inside him that never stopped raging. On his desk inside, a single envelope lay unopened. Its presence was unbearable, like a shadow stretching across the room. He had received it earlier that evening, slipped under his door without a sound. No address, no name, just his. Jackson had ignored it for hours, pouring himself into meaningless distractions, but the weight of it pressed against him until he couldn't breathe. Finally, with a deep breath, he set down his glass and reached for the envelope. His fingers traced the edge before tearing it open. Inside was a single piece of paper. No threats, no explanations, just 7 words typed neatly across the center. You don't know the whole truth yet. Jackson's jaw tightened as his pulse quickened. Whoever sent this knew him, knew what haunted him, knew the fractures he tried to hide beneath his carefully built exterior. He read the words again, his thoughts spiraling into questions he didn't want to face. What is the truth? About whom? And why now? A knock at his door startled him. Sharp, urgent. Jackson froze, the paper still in his hand. The night had only just begun, but something told him it was about to change everything. The cafe near the harbor had always been Jackson Thorne's quiet retreat, a place where he could disappear from the noise of the world. Tonight, though, the place felt different. The chatter of strangers seemed muted, the clinking of cups distant, as if the air itself held its breath. Jackson stirred his untouched coffee, his mind circling back to the letter he had found in his apartment earlier that day. A letter that wasn't meant for him, or at least not meant for the version of him he thought he was. No return address, no signature, just a single sentence in careful handwriting. You don't know the truth about who you are, but they do. The words dug under his skin like splinters. He had carried the letter folded in his pocket all day, his fingers brushing against it every few minutes like a man checking if his reality still existed. Rough night? A voice interrupted, smooth yet edged with something he couldn't place. Jackson looked up to see a man about his age, early 30s, leaning casually against the counter. Dark hair slicked back, sharp jawline, eyes that seemed to catalog every detail about him. The stranger smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Do I know you?" Jackson asked, his tone flat. The man slid into the chair opposite him without waiting for an invitation. "Not yet, but I know you. More than you realize." Jackson's jaw tightened. "If this is about money, I don't." The man raised a hand. "It's not about money. It's about answers. The kind you've been chasing your whole life." Jackson's heart skipped. He forced himself to stay calm, but his grip on the coffee cup betrayed him. The stranger leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Your name, Jackson Thorne, it's not the whole story. You've been living someone else's version of the truth. And if you want to survive what's coming, you'll need to decide if you're ready to see what's been hidden from you." The cafe suddenly felt colder. Jackson searched the man's face for any sign of a lie, but what unsettled him more was the quiet confidence he carried, as if he already knew Jackson's next words. "Who are you?" Jackson asked. The man's lips curved into a smile, chilling in its calmness. "Call me Elias, and consider me the first piece of your puzzle." Elias slid a small black envelope across the table. Jackson stared at it, his pulse quickening. He hadn't touched it yet, but he felt the weight of it in his chest, like it held the key to a door he wasn't sure he wanted to open. Before Jackson could speak, Elias stood. "Open it when you're alone. And remember, trust will be the sharpest blade at your throat. Even those closest to you may already be playing their part. And just like that, Elias walked out, leaving behind the faint scent of cologne and the echo of words that would not let Jackson rest. Jackson reached for the envelope, his hand trembling slightly. Whatever lay inside wasn't just information. It was a threat wrapped in truth. He slipped it into his coat pocket without opening it. Not yet. Not here. But as he stepped outside into the damp night air, the uneasy sensation returned, the same one that had lingered since he read the letter in his apartment. The prickling awareness that someone was watching him. Only this time, as he glanced at the far side of the street, he caught a silhouette moving too quickly into the shadows. The following days felt like an endless blur. Jackson Thorne buried himself in work at the firm, as if drafting contracts and reviewing corporate disputes could somehow distract him from the haunting questions burning in the back of his mind. Yet every time his pen touched paper, he felt her, Celine. Not her perfume, not her voice, but her absence. It echoed in the silence, a hollow reminder that he was alone in a city that never truly forgave. Nights were worse. The loft felt cavernous, the ticking of the clock louder than it had ever been before. His whiskey glass remained untouched more often than not, because drinking dulled the sharp edge he needed now. He had to stay clear, stay aware. Something was shifting around him, and he could feel it pressing closer. It was during one of those long nights that his phone vibrated with a single, anonymous message. "You don't know the truth about her. Meet me. Midnight. Pier 17. Jackson stared at the screen, his pulse quickening. He should have deleted it, dismissed it as a prank, but something deep inside told him it was real. Too real. He remembered the bruises on Celine's wrist, the way her eyes flickered with fear when she thought he wasn't looking. There had always been more to her story than she ever confessed. At exactly midnight, Jackson drove through the fog-choked streets, the city's neon lights reflecting in streaks on his windshield. Pier 17 was nearly deserted, save for the faint glow of a flickering lamp and the faint smell of salt water carried on the breeze. A lone figure stood at the edge of the dock, hooded, motionless, like a shadow detached from the night itself. Jackson approached cautiously, every muscle tensed, his hand brushing the inside of his jacket where he always kept a folded knife, just in case. "Who are you?" Jackson demanded, his voice low but steady. The figure lifted their head just enough for the lamp to reveal sharp features. Alaric Kane, Celine's estranged half-brother. Jackson had only met him once at a gala years ago, but his presence was unforgettable. Cold. Dangerous. "You shouldn't be here," Alaric said, his tone cutting like ice. "But I suppose you've never been good at staying away from things that aren't yours." Jackson clenched his jaw. "If this is about Celine, say it. Don't play games." Alaric smirked, but there was no humor in it. "Games? She's been playing you from the start. You think she loved you? You were nothing but a shield. A cover. She's far deeper than you could ever imagine. And now you are too." The words hit like a physical blow. Jackson stepped forward, his fists tightening. "You're lying." "Am I?" Alaric leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Ask her about the fire in Marseille. Ask her who she left behind that night. You'll see the truth when you finally stop pretending she's the saint you want her to be." Before Jackson could respond, Alaric slipped a sealed envelope into his hand and walked away into the fog, disappearing as though he had never been there at all. Jackson's heartbeat thundered in his chest. The envelope felt heavy in his palm, heavier than it should. Against his better judgment, he tore it open under the sickly glow of the dock lamp. Inside was a single photograph, Celine, years younger, standing beside a man Jackson had never seen before. The man's arm was around her, his face partially obscured, but his eyes looked deadly familiar. At the bottom of the photo was a handwritten note. "The past never stays buried, and neither will she." Jackson froze, the cold night air biting against his skin. His world tilted, unraveling at the edges. If Alaric was telling the truth, Celine wasn't just hiding secrets, she was hiding a life. And now, those secrets were clawing their way back into his. The storm outside had grown fierce, wind rattling the windows as if the night itself disapproved of Jackson Thorne's choices. The room was dim, shadows from the fireplace stretching long across the walls. He sat at the edge of his bed, his head in his hands, haunted by what he had discovered that day. A single folder lay open on the desk. Inside were documents, bank statements, encrypted emails, property deeds, enough evidence to suggest that someone close to him had been orchestrating a betrayal far greater than he had ever imagined. "Why you?" he whispered to the empty room, his voice hoarse with disbelief. The name highlighted in the papers burned into his thoughts, a name that carried both trust and love. He grabbed the folder and shoved it into the drawer, locking it as footsteps echoed in the hallway. His heart raced. Whoever had been moving quietly through the house these past nights was closer now. Too close. "Jackson," a voice called softly. It was familiar, disarming. The voice of someone who shouldn't have been there at this hour. He froze. Every instinct screamed at him not to answer. The air felt heavy, and for the first time, Jackson realized this wasn't paranoia. Someone truly was watching, waiting, and tonight, they had decided to step closer. The door handle turned slowly. Jackson reached for the drawer where the evidence lay, his fingers brushing the cold metal key still inside the lock. He had seconds to decide, expose what he had found and risk everything, or keep silent and live in the tension of this dangerous game. The door creaked open, revealing a silhouette framed in shadow. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating a face Jackson knew far too well. And in that instant, the truth cut deeper than any blade. The storm had passed, but the world it left behind was unsettlingly quiet. Jackson Thorne stood at the edge of his balcony, staring at the skyline of Ravenhurst, a city that seemed to whisper secrets in every flickering streetlight. The night air was damp, heavy with the smell of rain, but his mind was far from peaceful. He replayed Elena's words over and over. The confession about her connection to the mysterious syndicate, the revelation that she had once been a part of the very shadows hunting them. Her face haunted him, the tear sliding down her cheek, the way her voice cracked when she whispered, "I never meant for you to be dragged into this." Jackson wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to. But every instinct, the soldier's instinct, the survivor's instinct, told him there was more she hadn't said. She couldn't say. The sharp buzz of his phone pulled him back. An encrypted message flashed across the screen. "You're running out of time. Meet me at the Iron Bridge at dawn. Come alone, or she dies." His stomach tightened. The message wasn't signed, but he didn't need a name. The Iron Bridge was a place no one went after dark, an abandoned structure spanning the black waters of the Ash River, notorious for deals gone wrong, bodies dumped, and whispers of the underworld. Jackson's fists clenched around the phone. Whoever sent it knew about Elena. Whoever sent it wanted him vulnerable, desperate. Behind him, the door creaked. Elena stood there in the dim glow, her hair damp from a shower, her eyes swollen from crying. "Another message?" she asked, her voice soft but edged with fear. He hesitated, torn between honesty and protection. "Just noise," he lied, pocketing the phone. But Elena wasn't fooled. She stepped closer, her gaze locked on him. "Don't shut me out, Jackson. Not now. If they're coming for me, they'll come for you too. We don't survive this by pretending." The raw vulnerability in her tone cracked something in him. He reached out, brushing his thumb against her cheek. "Then tell me everything. No more half-truths. No more secrets." Elena's lips trembled. For a moment, she seemed ready to break, to spill every hidden chapter of her past. But then her phone rang, a sharp, piercing sound that made both of them freeze. She looked at the screen, her face draining of color. "It's him," she whispered. "Who?" Jackson demanded. Her eyes flicked up to his, filled with dread. "The man I thought I left behind. The one who owns all of this." Before Jackson could answer, the call ended, leaving nothing but silence. And in that silence, he realized something chilling. Elena wasn't just running from danger. She was running from someone powerful enough to reach into their lives, someone who knew exactly where to strike. The Iron Bridge wasn't just a trap. It was an invitation into the heart of the storm. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the city glistening as if it had been freshly polished. Jackson Thorne sat in his car at the curb, the engine running low, his eyes fixed on the mirror. He had parked just outside the offices of a boutique financial firm, one of the last places someone like Evelyn Marlowe should have been seen. The night before, that encrypted message had shaken him. It hadn't come from Evelyn herself, but from a burner phone linked back to her. The text was short, urgent, and dangerous. "Meet me. Answers lie deeper. Don't trust anyone." But what gnawed Jackson was the final part. "They're watching you too." He clenched the steering wheel, his knuckles whitening. Every instinct told him this wasn't just about Evelyn anymore. It was about him. Someone had carefully shifted the spotlight, and he wasn't sure if he was supposed to be the hunter or the prey. Through the glass lobby doors, he finally spotted her. Evelyn walked briskly, her tailored coat pulled tight, sunglasses masking her eyes though the clouds hadn't yet broken. She didn't look back, didn't hesitate. She slipped into a black sedan waiting for her, the windows tinted to secrecy. Jackson started the ignition harder, tailing her at a distance. The city blurred past as he followed the car through twisting avenues, down underpasses, and finally to the waterfront district. The sedan pulled into an abandoned warehouse near the docks, its rusted doors yawning open as if welcoming something it shouldn't. Evelyn got out, but she wasn't alone. A tall man in a gray suit, face shadowed by the brim of his hat, met her with a briefcase. Jackson's pulse quickened. He recognized that gait, that rigid military posture. It was Adrian Locke, a name whispered in scandals buried too deep for news outlets to survive reporting. Former intelligence officer, now a ghost broker of information and leverage. Through his binoculars, Jackson watched Evelyn and Adrian exchange terse words. Evelyn's hands trembling as she opened the briefcase he offered. Inside wasn't money, at least not in bundles. It was data drives, stacked in neat rows like bars of some darker currency. He snapped photos quickly, adrenaline running sharp. If Evelyn was entangled with Locke, then her secrets weren't just personal. They were geopolitical. But then it happened. Evelyn turned suddenly, her sunglasses reflecting the faint glint of Jackson's lens, even from the distance. She froze for a second, her posture stiffening before she whispered something to Locke. Locke followed her gaze. Their eyes locked across the empty dockyard, the predator and the observer caught in mutual recognition. Jackson ducked down, but it was too late. The warehouse lights flickered on, flooding the lot in harsh brilliance. Engines roared to life inside, and within seconds 2 SUVs barreled out, tearing toward his position. Jackson cursed under his breath, throwing the car into reverse, gravel spitting from his tires. As he sped away, a realization cut through the chaos. Evelyn hadn't warned him off last night to keep him safe. She had drawn him closer, and now he needed to decide, was Evelyn Marlowe the key to unraveling everything, or the trap set to end him? The days that followed felt like walking on a tightrope strung high above an abyss. Every message Jackson sent to Amelia carried a weight he couldn't shake. Their conversations were measured, filled with half-truths and pauses long enough to drown in. Amelia had grown more cautious, her replies shorter, as though she was guarding a secret of her own. Late one evening, Jackson sat in his apartment, staring at the faint glow of his laptop. An anonymous email blinked on his screen. The subject line read, "Do you really know who she is?" His pulse quickened as he clicked it open. Attached was a photograph, grainy, taken from a distance. Amelia stood outside an unfamiliar building, talking to a man Jackson had never seen before. They were close, too close. The man's hand brushed her arm in a way that made Jackson's chest tighten with something dangerously close to rage. Below the photo was a single line. "The truth is never what it seems." Jackson's mind raced. Was it blackmail? A warning? Or a cruel game to destabilize him? He saved the photo, stared at it again, and tried to convince himself there was an explanation. But deep down, the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing fast. The next day, Jackson decided to confront Amelia, but when he reached her apartment, she wasn't there. Instead, he found her neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, who looked uneasy. She left in a hurry, the older woman said. Didn't even say where she was going. Something seemed off. Hours passed with no word from Amelia. By nightfall, Jackson drove aimlessly through the city, searching for answers that refused to surface. His phone finally buzzed just past midnight. A text. No name, just a number he didn't recognize. If you care about her, stop digging. His grip tightened around the phone, jaw clenching. Whoever this was, they were watching. His instincts screamed at him to back away, but his heart couldn't. He had to know the truth. The following morning, his friend Elias, who worked in cyber forensics, came through with a lead. The mysterious number traced back to a disposable phone, purchased under a fake identity. But the email, with Amelia's photograph, that came from a secure server often used by underground networks. This isn't random, Elias said, voice low. Someone's pulling strings, Jax. And I think Amelia's caught in the middle. Jackson's world tilted. Was she in danger? Or was she the danger? He remembered her eyes, the way they held both light and shadow, and he couldn't reconcile the woman he loved with the image of her secretly meeting another man. By evening, his phone rang again. This time it was Amelia. Her voice trembled. Jackson, I need you to trust me. No matter what you hear, no matter what you see, trust me. Please. Before he could respond, the line went dead. Jackson sat frozen, the city lights bleeding through his window like fractured stars. For the first time, he realized that whatever he had stepped into was much larger than lies and love. It was a storm that could consume them both. And at its center stood Amelia, holding secrets that could either save him or destroy everything. The conference room fell into silence, the air vibrating with tension as Jackson Thorne slammed the thick binder of evidence onto the polished table. The sharp sound echoed through the glass walls, drawing startled glances from the board members and executives seated in neat rows. The dossier inside contained months of painstakingly gathered proof, financial discrepancies, forged signatures, and communication trails that pointed to something far darker than simple corporate mismanagement. Read it, Jackson demanded, his voice low but cutting like a blade. His eyes locked on Adrian Cross, the man who had been carefully crafting his downfall from the shadows. Adrian's face was impassive, but a flicker of unease darted across his features. Lena sat beside Jackson, her hand resting lightly on his arm beneath the table. To the others, it looked like a gesture of calm solidarity, but Jackson felt the tremor in her touch. She knew, as he did, that this was the moment that could either vindicate him or destroy everything they had fought for. One of the senior board members, a white-haired woman with steel-gray eyes, flipped open the binder. Her frown deepened with every page she scanned. "These are serious accusations, Mr. Thorne," she said. "Are you suggesting that Mr. Cross has been orchestrating fraud under this company's name?" "I'm not suggesting," Jackson said, standing tall. His voice rose with conviction. "I'm stating it. The records don't lie. Millions have been siphoned into offshore accounts, shell companies, deals signed under falsified authority. Every thread leads back to Adrian Cross." Adrian let out a sharp laugh, the sound brittle and mocking. "This is absurd. Desperation, that's all this is." Jackson's been under pressure, his judgment clouded by personal entanglements. His gaze flicked toward Lena with pointed malice. "You're letting your emotions compromise you, Jackson. Don't drag this company down because you can't separate business from." "Enough," Jackson snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "This isn't about me, or Lena, or whatever smear you're trying to weave. This is about corruption, about betrayal, and the fact that you've been using this company as your personal puppet." The board murmured among themselves, unease crackling in the room. The woman with steel-gray eyes raised a hand to quiet them. "We'll need time to review this evidence thoroughly, Mr. Cross. Until then, I advise caution in your statements." Adrian's jaw tightened, but he leaned back in his chair, forcing a smirk. "Do what you must. I have nothing to hide." But Jackson saw it, the faint twitch at the corner of Adrian's mouth, the tightening of his grip on the chair arm. He was rattled, and that meant Jackson was getting close. As the meeting adjourned, Jackson and Lena stepped out into the dim corridor. The adrenaline still raced through Jackson's veins, but underneath, it was a chill of dread. They had confronted Adrian, but something about his controlled composure unsettled him. Lena glanced up at him, her voice hushed. "You saw it too, didn't you? He's planning something. He won't let this go quietly." Jackson nodded grimly. This was just the beginning. He knows the walls are closing in, and that makes him dangerous. The elevator doors opened with a chime. As they stepped inside, Jackson's phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket, expecting another legal update. Instead, his breath froze. It was a photo, a grainy, night-shot image of Lena leaving her apartment the night before. The message beneath it read, "You've chosen the wrong side, Thorne. Next time, I won't just be watching." Jackson's fist clenched around the phone. His pulse thundered, not with fear, but with rage. Adrian wasn't just fighting for control of the company anymore. He was threatening Lena's life. The line between professional war and personal vendetta had been obliterated. And Jackson Thorne knew one thing with absolute certainty. The final battle was no longer about boardrooms or balance sheets. It was about survival. The city had grown colder, not just with the turning season, but with the invisible weight of dread hanging in the air. Jackson Thorne sat by the window of his apartment, his silhouette cut against the faint glow of the streetlights. The storm outside mirrored the one within him. His phone buzzed relentlessly. Calls from people he no longer trusted, messages carrying warnings that only deepened his unease. For the first time in years, he felt the fragile thread of control slipping from his hands. He had fought battles in courtrooms, boardrooms, and even against betrayal within his own home. But what he faced now was different. This was not just about money, power, or reputation. This was about survival. The last words he had heard from Sienna echoed in his mind. "They know, Jackson. They know everything." The way she had whispered it, trembling as if shadows were closing in around her, had left him restless ever since. If she was right, if their enemies had pieced together the secrets they had tried so hard to bury, then there would be no turning back. He rubbed his temples, his eyes fixed on the glass as rain streaked downward in chaotic patterns. Behind him, the silence was broken by the sudden creak of the apartment door. Jackson spun around, his chest tightening. It wasn't Sienna. It wasn't any of the few allies he had left. Standing in the doorway was a figure cloaked in darkness, their face partially obscured, the metallic glint of something hidden beneath their coat flashing in the dim light. "Long time, Jackson," the figure said, voice low, deliberate, carrying the weight of familiarity and menace. Jackson's breath hitched. He knew that voice. It was a ghost from his past, a ghost he thought had been buried along with the worst of his secrets. The storm outside howled louder, as if the city itself understood the reckoning about to unfold. Jackson Thorne stood in the rain-slicked street, the neon glow of the city distorting in puddles at his feet. The message he had just received was still burning in his mind. "The truth isn't in the files, Jackson. It's in her. Her. Sienna." He replayed every conversation, every touch, every secret glance that had passed between them. The woman he thought was his anchor in the storm might be the very force dragging him into the depths. But the problem wasn't just trust, it was survival. The men who had followed him since dawn were still out there. He had shaken them off temporarily, ducking into the maze of alleys, but he knew the reprieve wouldn't last. The organization wanted silence, and he had become the loudest voice. He finally reached the safe house, an abandoned loft with boarded windows and flickering power. The door creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, the faint glow of a lamp revealed Sienna sitting on the worn couch, her hair damp, her expression unreadable. "You're late," she said softly, though her tone carried more than impatience. It carried fear. "I had company," Jackson replied, his voice rough. He closed the door, bolting it, then leaned against it, watching her carefully. "We need to talk, Sienna. Now." She looked away, biting her lip. "I know. Then tell me." Jackson pressed, stepping closer. "What aren't you saying? Every lead I've chased points back to you. The files, the codes, the betrayals, they all trace to your name." Her eyes glistened as she met his gaze. It's not what you think. Then explain it, Jackson snapped, slamming a hand against the wall. The frustration, the exhaustion, the endless layers of lies, it all spilled over. Because right now, I don't know if I'm looking at the woman who saved me or the one who's been setting me up to die. Tears finally broke free, running down Sienna's cheeks. Jackson, I had no choice. They had my brother. They told me if I didn't feed them information, they would kill him. Every move I made, every secret I gave them, it was to keep him alive. His chest tightened. It made sense, too much sense. The gaps in her story, the inexplicable betrayals, the moments when she had seemed torn in half. Still, it didn't erase the danger he was in now. You should have told me, he whispered, though the anger still simmered beneath the surface. If I had, you'd be dead, she said, voice trembling. They watch everything, Jackson. Every word, every step. I've been walking a line between keeping you alive and keeping my brother safe. And now it's collapsing. Jackson paced the room, running his hands through his hair. He wanted to believe her. Part of him already did. But another part whispered that she could be weaving another layer of deception, one meant to keep him just close enough until it was too late. Finally, he stopped, turning to her. Then we end this. Together. No more secrets, no more half-truths. We go after them, cut out the rod at its core. But if you're lying to me, his voice dropped to a low, deadly promise. I will know, and I won't forgive it. Sienna nodded, her shoulders shaking. I'm not lying. But Jackson, you don't understand. The core? It's bigger than we imagined. It's not just an organization. It's an empire. And the man at the center, she hesitated, as if the words themselves carried too heavy a weight to speak, is someone you know. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jackson's pulse thundered in his ears. Whoever it was, whoever had orchestrated this nightmare, was not a stranger lurking in the shadows. It was someone close, someone who had been part of his life all along. The floor beneath him seemed to shift, as if reality itself were tilting. For the first time, he wondered if he was ready to hear the name that would shatter everything. The tension in the room thickened as Jackson spread the photos across the table like a general laying out a war map. The dim light reflected off the glossy images, offshore accounts, private meetings in hidden villas, and, most damning of all, the transfer logs connecting the hollow veil to Darius Thorne's personal signature. You understand what this means? Jackson asked, his voice low, steady. Zara swallowed hard. It means your father isn't just funding them. He is them. The hollow veil was never just a syndicate in the shadows. It was his creation from the beginning. Jackson's jaw tightened. He had suspected, but seeing the evidence in black and white ripped through his chest like shrapnel. The man who had raised him, the man whose approval he had spent years chasing, wasn't just corrupt. He was the architect of the very chaos Jackson had sworn to destroy. A sharp knock rattled the door. 3 measured reps. Jackson's hand went to his gun instinctively. Zara froze. It's me, came a muffled voice. Cashin. Jackson hesitated, then cracked the door open. Cashin stepped in, his usually calm expression hardened into stone. He tossed a small device onto the table. A black cube, pulsing faintly with blue light. They know you're here, Cashin said bluntly. That tracker was on your car. The hollow veil is closing in. For the first time, Zara's mask of composure cracked. We don't have time to plan. We need to move now. Jackson's gaze swept over the evidence, the tracker, his allies. Every instinct told him this was no longer a mission. It was a war. We don't run, Jackson said finally, his voice like steel. Not anymore. If Darius wants to hide behind shadows, then we burn the shadows down. Tonight, the hollow veil falls. Cashin's eyes flickered with approval. Zara's lips parted, equal parts fear and admiration. But deep inside, Jackson felt the weight of a truth heavier than any weapon. To bring down the hollow veil, he wouldn't just have to fight strangers in the dark. He would have to destroy his own father. The forest had fallen silent after the chaos. Smoke from the burned warehouse coiled into the night sky, blotting out the stars. Jackson Thorne stood at the edge of the clearing, chest heaving, the weight of everything pressing down on him. His hands were still shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline that refused to leave his bloodstream. Behind him, the last of the syndicate's men lay scattered, unconscious or worse. The final confrontation had been brutal. Each step forward had cost him blood and strength, but he had delivered on his promise. Tonight, the syndicate had fallen. Jackson, Lena's voice cut through the haze. She stumbled out of the trees, bruised but alive, clutching a pistol loosely at her side. Relief washed through him, but it was brief. Her eyes carried the same truth his heart had already accepted. Victory came with a price. They walked toward each other, both moving slowly, as though afraid the moment would shatter if they rushed. "It's over," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jackson shook his head. "Not over. Just finish for now. There will always be someone else, Lena." Another hand behind the curtain. Her gaze searched his face, reading the scars, old and new, that told the story better than words could. "Then what about you? Do you keep running into the fire until there's nothing left of you?" For the first time that night, Jackson's expression softened. He looked past her, toward the line of trees, the faint horizon just beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. The night was ending, but he knew he'd never walk away from the shadows. It was the only place he belonged. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I don't get to stop, Lena. People like me, we don't retire. We just keep fighting until the world doesn't need us anymore." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. She simply nodded because deep down she knew he was right. The roar of distant sirens carried through the trees. Law enforcement, finally catching up to the destruction left in his wake. Jackson pulled back, his hand lingering on hers for just a second longer than necessary. When they asked what happened, he said quietly, "Tell them I was never here." And with that, Jackson Thorne turned and walked into the forest, swallowed by the shadows he had mastered, leaving Lena staring after him as the dawn broke fully across the sky. She whispered his name once, Jackson, but the forest gave no answer. Only silence, and a lingering certainty that this was not the end of Jackson Thorne's story. It was only the beginning.